What's up? Welcome to a new episode of Movie Schmovie. This is episode number 386. My name is Steve, one of the co-hosts of the show, and as always, I'm joined by
Ron
and John.
This episode is going to be an interesting one. I mean, we don't have anything really truly mapped out beyond our required viewing. Ron and I were not able to see Barbie, so we'll push that down the road a little bit. Once we can all talk about it, we'll probably go into it a little further. Obviously, it's a huge sensation. Broke $1 billion since we last recorded, and who knows how high it will go. Again, Oppenheimer, part of that crazy marketing, that's still doing crazy business. I think at the time of recording this, I want to say it's Nolan's fourth or fifth highest grossing film ever, which is kind of bonkers for what Oppenheimer is. But
and for a guy who's got three Batman films in his
for sure. But I mean, you even get to like
resume.
Interstellar and he's got some big blockbustery movies, and this is not that, but it's really found a wave to ride here in this great marketing and the timing and the whole Barbenheimer sensation. But eventually we'll get around to Barbie. But yeah, otherwise beyond the required viewing, which John's pick last week was the Offence. We'll get Ronald's pick for the next one. Is that the order that we go? Yeah. We'll get Ronald's pick for the next one, and then we'll kind of just run through what else we've seen over the past week. That'll be the episode. But John, remind us about the Offence. Tell us why you picked it, and let's go right to required viewing.
Just as a quick reminder to both of you, a good way to remember the order is it's alphabetical by our last names. I don't know that was planned, but it works out that it's Ronald, Steve, me. So James, Ritter, Walker. Yeah, the Offence was on my radar because a couple people that I follow had mentioned it just as a sort of kind of the way you do when you think maybe people don't know about this movie, and it kind of fits in with the tradition of a kind of movie that people celebrate, this kind of gritty 70s drama. And we had just done sort of an accidental themed round of, if I kept it going, of police thrillers or crime thrillers as part of our required viewing, because we went from Black Rain to, what was the last one? Your pick, Steve?
Deep Cover.
Just Deep Cover to this. So this is a nice little trilogy of, toxic masculinity, crime sagas, involving the police, you might say, if you want to loosely define it. But so I think it just made it feel like it was a good pick. And I'm always curious about these movies that seem like you would have heard of them before, or that seem like you would know more about them just by who's involved in them. This was by the way, I've gone back and forth. Anytime you find like a pronunciation guide online, it says it's Sidney Lumet or Lumet. But if anybody has ever said his name publicly, like in an award ceremony or an interview, they say Lumet. So I'm going back. I'm going back to Lumet. But if anyone out there wants to
correcting this,
wants to correct my correction, I say go back to our last episode 385 and hear that we did try to roll with some new pronunciation, but it's futile. It's Sidney Lumet.
John, I think you have your bases covered, John. I think we're good. I think we're okay.
All right.
But I do say when you said it last week, it was kind of like it threw me back a little bit. I was like, wait, that's how you say his name?
Well, have you ever heard someone be interviewed on a show, like on an NPR show or whatever, and the person says their name in some weird way, and you go, wait a minute, that can't be right. Yeah. And then you dig into it, and that's right. I just had remembered someone saying Sidney Lumet in a different way, and I found, anyway, if it's Lumet, we're not going to do that. We're going to go with the old school. We're going to say it the way Pacino says it at the Oscars, which is Lumet.
There you go.
So anyway, I just felt like I would have heard of a gritty crime drama starring Sean Connery, directed by Sidney Lumet. Like, I feel like, does that mean it sucks or something? But then I dug into it and I was like, no, it's actually, it's reasonably critically well regarded. And the reasons why people are challenged by this film are the reasons why, if you watch it, you would say it's the film's intending to challenge you. But it's based on a play, which makes a lot of sense when you look at the movie, a play that kind of unfolds over 3 acts. And the play was called This Story of Yours, and it involves a scene between Sergeant Johnson, played by Sean Connery in the film, a scene between him and his wife, a scene between him and an investigating officer who is talking to him about something he's just done, and a scene between him and a presumed criminal in an interrogation room. And you can see how the movie kind of follows that there are these sort of epic scenes that unfold with these characters. And it centers on this cop who's having it's sort of a comment on what we now are really talking about the police. And that's what maybe made this movie feel very current when people were talking about it, is that it's really confronting head on this idea that to be a policeman, in some ways, it plays to, if someone was kind of if they had tendencies towards a certain kind of way of solving a problem that might not be super healthy, or if they have maybe even some kind of narcissism, or maybe even a breakdown of their perception of reality, having that person in the role of a policeman is very dangerous. But also it makes you think about the danger to the policeman's brain of being exposed to things. I mean, I remember a friend of mine who was a highway patrolman for a while, and he seemed really dedicated to the job. And years later, I saw that he had quit, and I asked him why, and he said, I had a job where every day I only saw people at their worst, either somebody who was doing something terrible, somebody who was having their worst moment, or someone to whom I was delivering the worst news. And he said that it was such an ugly piece of humanity and such a dismaying slice of humanity that he was being exposed to, that he couldn't handle it. So I don't know. That's always been in my mind when I think about cops. And there's a phrase called cop worship that you hear people talk about with regards to a lot of detective stories and a lot of crime stories, where we just assume that the policemen we're following are the good guys. And that makes sense in a certain kind of simple way. But the best stories will always do that other thing of trying to find the ambiguity within that world. And I think this movie is definitely, it's in that 70s tradition of something that's really trying to examine, okay, this guy who thinks he's found his man, this child rapist and possible child murderer, that they think they've caught him. And this cop has, I mean, he's having flashes of these awful crimes he's witnessed or that he knows have happened in his mind, and he's losing his grip on reality, and the way he treats his wife is horrendous because of what's happening to him. And anyway, I thought that it was not quite what I was expecting. There were moments in it that really chilled me to the bone, and I thought there were some amazing moments in this film of just the interplay between two characters. And Sean Connery goes to some pretty dark places in this movie as this troubled policeman. I don't know, maybe I could open it up to you guys. What did it mean to you, Ronald, the name Sidney Lumet, the name Sean Connery, when you saw that we were going to be talking about this movie? And then how did you feel watching The Offense?
I mean, what I realized as I was watching that, I don't know if I watched many Sean Connery movies outside of the stuff with the Bond stuff and
the Untouchables.
Untouchables, and maybe a couple stray movies like that. But I don't know if I'd
Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade.
The bigger American ones. But as I'm watching it, it's like it lost me at some parts, but once you really see what's happening, I guess the whole breakdown that he was having, and then the confrontation that took up the bulk of the third act. I mean, that's what movies are made for. You kind of are sitting there man, there's a big gap in he comes into the room, the guy's really beat up. How does it happen? What happens?
Right.
And then they explain it in that third act. And it is really pretty amazing. It almost feels like the script was written, this was the bulk of it. This was the pitch to the studios. Hey, read this interaction between these two people, because it was so good. The way that Sean Connery would kind of shrink and get bigger. It reminds me of one other thing. Hard Candy, which was kind of this exchange of power that kept happening. This guy would shrink, and this little girl was kind of and then it would change, and then it would change, and it would go back and forth. And that dynamic was really cool. Especially when in your head, you think you have a profile of a person. I mean, there's a thing, this is so random, but I'm going to say it just because it's in my brain. As a person that's has some medical issues, you realize that people are just doing their jobs, and you may talk to somebody who's just kind of has a profile. They're like, oh, it looks like this, it sounds like this, so it must be this.
Mm-hmm.
And he realized that like people are getting up just doing a job, and that can get a little nasty. Like some people wake up on the wrong side of the bed, and that can affect a sequence of events. They have the power to arrest you, to profile you as a person, to make these big life-changing decisions. And he was obsessed with these concepts that were triggering for him, but he may have been doing what they call projection in therapy, projecting some of that shit on people.
Right.
It just was so weird that to the point where I didn't understand what was happening. That's the part that lost me at first. I'm like, why is this happening like this? But then, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I was just going to interject, but please hold that thought. When you said it lost you, what I thought about was a conversation we've had before about like just watching stories about awful people. And there's a point where you're like, why am I watching this? And there was a point about midway into the scene with his wife where I was like, where I was like, this is so unpleasant. And I hate this guy so much that I don't want to see his navel gazing, his introspection. I thought, treat the people that are helping you nice first, and then you can go and have your drink and open up. But the way he was, I mean, I kept being afraid he was going to hit her or something. That scene was brutal. But I think that was intentional. Whether that's not an easy, that doesn't mean it maybe isn't a little slow paced and through some of those stretches. But I think they had done so much good work at that point to set up maybe what you're talking about, which is the sort of what's on his brain that I felt like, okay, at least they earned this kind of quiet moment, because the first maybe 15-20 minutes of the movie are a bit more, you get quicker, shorter scenes that sort of set up this world. But I felt like it was kind of losing me at that moment of like, right when I was wondering, why are we watching this story about this guy? I don't like this guy. That was right when the other officers came over to get him, and suddenly it got so much more interesting again, because the way they had to, I mean, that the dynamics of how they were treating him and versus how they were treating him earlier, everything was almost like a mob movie where the tables have turned on you, and now you've got to go, you've got to go sit before the dawn or something. Anyway, I just wanted to say that about when you said it kind of lost you. I was going to say it kind of lost me too, when I was wondering, like, why do I care about this guy who seems like just a piece of shit? Like, even though he might be trying to do the right thing, he was so clearly a monster to me.
It was rough, man. I was like, wow, this guy just told his wife that she was never pretty.
Yeah.
What? Why are you even here?
And he's trying not to talk to her because he never wanted to talk to her. That was just ugly as hell.
It's heartbreaking. Steve, what'd you think?
Yeah.
It wasn't for me. I'm going to tell you. I think the point that you just described, John, is kind of where it did lose me. I mean, because I feel like to that point, the scene with his wife, and then even when he's being investigated or when he's being interrogated, or they have this conversation with, I guess, one of his superiors, like those two scenes, it just kind of felt so tedious to me at times. Like it just felt like it was like spinning wheels, like this over and over.
Yeah.
Like I don't want to say randomness, because I mean, by the time you get to the end of the movie, it does kind of like, I do think that the last conversation, when you go back to him with, is it Baxter or whatever the
Baxter is
the guy's name is. I think from there it kind of was pulling me back in. But I mean, I honestly feel like with what amounts to really like 3 or 4 big set pieces, there's just a lot of like over, like a lot of the same themes being hit over and over again, which for me at least, it didn't seem to like move it along until it got to that final sequence. Like when you see him back in the interrogation room from earlier in the movie, and honestly, I also felt like a lot of the like the little flashback pieces that you get, like the random shots of these things that he's keeping in the recesses of his brain or of his mind, when he's talking to his wife and describing what we just watched, as he's flashing through them. I don't really think like it did anything. I mean, how do I say this? I don't really think it did anything to make me at that point have any understanding like why I care about this cop at all. And I think that's why I feel like it lost me right there. Like it didn't make me more interested in why he is that way. It really just kind of pushed me away from really wanting to see any more about, the stuff that he's carrying and like why he doesn't talk to his wife about it and all this thing. But I mean,
right. It's like it's presented about the most unpleasant way as possible. Yeah. And like it's even shot in this kind of flat, kind of drab style, which I think really works for some of the stuff in the movie. But that's why I stressed there were some amazing moments in this movie, is because I kind of felt like throughout I was going, I mean, again, when I found out it was based on a play, I was like, that makes so much sense that it's these conversation scenes that go on and on and on, you know. And I actually really liked each scene for different reasons, but I did find that, like I said, the scene with his wife just like almost unbearable, because I was at this moment of like, ugh, I hope this movie's not going to like try to make us feel bad for him or something. And then you get to the end and you realize they really weren't ever trying to make you feel bad for him. They just wanted you to see maybe even a self-serving idea he has that he's this tortured guy.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I thought the scene with his sort of superior in interrogating him was really good. But I agree, it kind of like it did get into a kind of loop a couple times, and go on a little long. And you know, it's a matter of a movie that's like an hour and 53 minutes. That if it were like 90 minutes,
that's exactly right.
What you're talking about wouldn't really be an issue. That doesn't mean people would. It wouldn't change the fact that this is a bleak fucking movie, but like, I think you're right about the kind of pacing. And I would even say this, I extend it the sort of like, okay, 50 years later, this movie, it has a more indulgent pacing than this material would have today. You know what I mean? You just wouldn't treat this material this way. Like the movie, it actually made me think the most of is Prisoners. I was constantly thinking of the way the sort of vengeance narrative in that played out, and the way, especially at the scene at the beginning where the girl goes walking off and we see the neighbor. That scene I thought was great, when the neighbor stops because she drops her groceries and she looks over and she sees something that you could tell yourself is extremely suspicious or not suspicious at all, which is a little girl walking across the field and being met by a grown-up who seems to walk off with them. And you could tell yourself, oh, that's just, she's meeting her dad or something. But then you'd be thinking, I don't know. I just thought that was, if it had more of that kind of solving the crime stuff, even him going through the woods when he finds the girl, I thought some of that stuff was really creepy and weird, the way that it was shot. And also, now that I'm thinking about him finding her in the woods, one of the worst things the movie really hints at and really kind of comes out and says is that, you talk about projection, Ronald, this guy is like such a piece of shit. He's actually experiencing some of these desires that the people he's after are experiencing. And like, I think it's very the ambiguity of the end of this movie, as far as like, what is the true situation at Baxter? What is his true guilt? We don't really know. We almost feel like Sergeant Johnson is more guilty than Baxter. We know that he's guilty of murdering a man, and we know that he's guilty of having these weird desires and stuff. I don't know. I just thought it was an interesting thing. I kept almost waiting for some twist where it's like, we find out that it's him, rather than it just kind of being like, it might as well have been you. Look at the way you treat women. Look at the way you treat people. Even when that witness came in, the woman that we saw with the groceries, when she's in the police station, he's like, why weren't you here earlier? It's like, he's just such a fucking hard prick towards everybody. But I know what you mean, Steve, and that's where I am with a lot of this type of stuff, where it's like, I think this was compelling, but I always have that question of, and it's just my general diet, I'm not really looking for stories where the person's terrible, and that's kind of, I end it just going, yep, as terrible as he seemed 5 minutes in, that's how terrible he is at the end. I think in the 70s, maybe exploring some of these masculine role model type characters and blowing them up, I think it might have been more of an exciting idea. But we've seen so many terrible people, not celebrated, but just stories about them, you know. And it's like, I don't know.
Yeah, and also reading about like just the timing of this movie, it also feels like a very overt effort to like to not be James Bond, you know, like to to basically be like, this is what else I can do. And I do think like Connery's performance is really good. I mean, I think most of the performances of the key figures in the movie are good / very good. But I mean, I feel like there were moments, you know, especially even at the end, like even though that pulled me back in, I think that, you know, they just get into these like cycles of just like a shouting matches, and it's just like who can shout in different ways. And you know, there are times when some of the dialogue just was kind of not clicking for me. And also, like, this is a movie of its time too. Like, it's my first time ever seeing it, and you know, I'm familiar with a lot of the other more, I guess, well-known or successful Lumet films. You know, and I mean, even seeing some of the other movies that I liked more than this, that I could see that this was a precursor to. What's the one with Treat Williams?
Oh
my God, Prince of the City.
Yes.
Like that is like that shares a lot of DNA with this movie too, you know, in terms of that cop figure and the moral and like what they're carrying and how they're acting and things like that. But Yeah, I don't know. It's just like something just didn't click for me, and I think overall, it didn't really feel like there was a lot of style to it in terms of the direction. But I guess that's kind of like his films can kind of be all over the place in terms of a signature style. But yeah, I don't know. This one just wasn't for me.
Yeah.
But I appreciate your pick, and I'm glad I watched it. And I will say, I swear, like I don't you asking about it on the thread today, Ronald, like what the name of the movie was. I cannot remember the name of this movie. Like it's so, and I don't know if it's just the way that they spell it differently.
It is. It
like,
is.
There's something in my brain that all I keep thinking of whenever I look it up or when I think about it is like my brain wants to keep saying The Confession or The Confess.
Yeah.
Not The Offense.
Right. No.
And like I found myself constantly, I'm like, wait, Sean Connery looking through okay, that's the one. But I like even telling Aaron about what it was tonight. I was like, I just told Ronald the name of this movie earlier. And it's because I was watching it when you texted asking about it.
Yeah.
Right. I was like, oh
like,
my
what
God.
the fuck is the name of this movie? Like, and it wasn't like it. I really do love the movies. Like I love when, especially something that I haven't heard of or something like that. And I could not remember it. I actually got it. I actually like put it in a place to watch and I couldn't remember the name of it. Like it was like, yeah.
That definitely happened to me the first time I heard it mentioned, because I was like, oh, that's someone said, oh yeah, the Sidney Lumet film with Sean Connery where he kills the guy that he's interrogating. And it's like I was like, that sounds pretty intense. Why have I not heard it? I mean, that question I was talking about before. And then when I was going back to try to put it on my list for required viewing, I had that same thought of like, wait, what was the fucking name of that thing again? And then when I saw what it was, I was like, oh, no wonder I couldn't remember that name. It is sort of I mean, I do think it fits the movie, and it's a kind of clever name because it does again make you wonder like what's really going on here. But no, I mean, I think there's always going to be that question when a movie is bleak and drab and punishing, and it's done that on purpose. There's always going to be that question in my head of like, but could you have done the fun version of that? Fun's the wrong word, but you know what I mean. Could you have could you have done the more entertaining version of that? And I think part of it is, yes, this is definitely a movie of its time. And whereas I think I was able to eventually plug into it and get those key moments, like even just with that kind of dry scene between him and his superior talking, there were all these moments where the guy was kind of trying to get him to tell a better story.
Yes.
And he wasn't
like
hearing it. I thought that was but leading him on in a way that was very edged, like had a cold edge to it, where eventually it's like, I kind of came down here to hear what you would say, and you haven't impressed me with your account of this in any way. And you're so used to maybe seeing the cop talk his way out of it or the supervisor kind of be on his side. I feel like that was another way this movie was blowing up those tropes that you expect in a sort of cop worship story. But does that mean I'm in a hurry to watch it again anytime soon or ever? No. So so I'm glad to have seen it, but yes, I'm glad it wasn't 4 scenes of that length of him kind of talking in circles with somebody. Yeah. But no, I think I liked it. But I don't know if this is a movie that you're supposed to like go, oh, that was great.
It's funny you mentioned the prisoner earlier, because like it crossed my mind too. And even what you're saying just now, it's like I think Prisoner is an example of what you described just now. It's like, I don't know that I seek out these kinds of movies, but like, even when we go back to like our top movie of the decade, when we had that for our big episodes, like that's the one I picked. Like that's literally one of my favorite movies of all time.
Yeah.
And it's like, and it's because there's so much more there for me. There's obviously beyond being more entertaining, but like there's just it is bleak as all hell. And I mean, even seeing that movie before being a parent and after, it just adds different layers to it for me. And it's a movie I have rewatched multiple times. And that's just because like I just connect to it so deeply. But it is an apt comparison. Like I thought about the same thing watching this, just because of how bleak this felt from the jump.
And the idea of a person who is maybe not guilty, but still seems to be carrying some kind of role or guilt in a situation. Like that Baxter guy, I liked what he was saying about the way he like privately mentally tortures this bully that he used to have by just having a better life than him and having him around. I thought that was really fun stuff. But again, I think that It was mainly because of the actors going back and forth. And yes, definitely when you watch movies from a certain era back, the acting style, there is a little bit more of like suddenly yelling is like, that's like the height. That's like the height
of flex,
of performance. And I can see it, and I can understand the tradition of that, like, you know, being able to project and, you know, showing your character's emotion that directly. But I think we have gotten used to sort of like mic'd up close, subtle sort of acting as compared to that. So that is another way that, like, for something to be sort of exhaustingly slow paced and also sort of over the top at the same time, it's a you know, that's an early 70s movie.
Yeah, for sure.
But like I said, I'm glad I watched it, and this is right up my alley in terms of, this is the kind of forgotten movie or overlooked movie that I'm so interested to go back and find out why, you know, like, it's interesting to track the films that aren't the big films on someone's resume, which is,
right.
You know, whether it's the acting or the directing. So yeah, what does that mean for next time, Ronald? What's our next required viewing selection?
I want to take you back to ye old 2008, the beginning of a genre. So I just discovered sci-fi not too long ago, but there's actually in 2008 an actual genre of film was kind of coined, and that's British hoodie horror.
Oh,
and just fresh off the heels of the whole Yellowstone verse is one of the more popular actors right now, Kelly Riley, Michael Fassbender, Jack O'Connell in one movie, Eden Lake.
Oh, so, hell yeah.
James Watkins kind of started this genre of movies, and like for the next 10 or so years, there were several movies. And for anybody that's not familiar with the genre, it's kind of this commentary on the middle and lower class, just the idea that like hoodies represent poverty, a level of aggression, a level of ruthlessness. And this is one of those movies that I'd always heard about. And Kelly Riley, I actually didn't even know she was British up until very recently. This is one of those movies that, like, when you look up like British horror, I see the picture of her leaning against the tree, and I didn't know that was her. Yeah. And then it just kind of started to, you know, make sense after a while.
So when it's going to be a nice, like the connective tissue between it and the Offense is going to be, this is an unpleasant movie.
It's seeming like it. And,
but no, it'll be an interesting one to talk about. You've seen it, Steve?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So it'll be I think this is the first time, might be one of the first times that I feel like I have a firm picture in my head of the movie we're about to talk about. So this will be, but you know, I'll watch it again. I'm gonna, you know, I'll make myself sit through it. It is a nail biter.
Is it terrible? Or should I?
No. I would never, even if I thought it was terrible, I wouldn't veto a choice. But
you know what I mean? Like if it's like too disturbing, I'm like, oh god damn it.
Oh, it's not too disturbing. No, I mean,
okay.
I like this movie. I'm excited to. I haven't seen it in a while.
Okay.
I literally feel like it was within that year or two it came out. I know I saw this movie.
Yeah.
It may have even been a movie that when I used to work that we may have handled when it came out.
Oh wow.
Like a smaller release for it. But yeah, I definitely remember her and Michael Fassbender in this movie. But yeah, this will be a fun one to rewatch.
Cool.
This is that survival, you know, it like horror, yes, but like it's got that real extreme survival.
Okay, cool.
You know,
cool.
Survival in the woods, especially. Yeah. Well, never mind. Let's just watch it.
Are you guys ready? Are you guys ready for the services that offer Eden Lake?
I was gonna go. Yeah, I have a list here too.
Plex, Voodoo, Pluto, Tubi, Redbox, Amazon Prime Video, all for free. Like, this is a monopoly. Like, whatever you pick up, you could fall into this movie for free. So like, that's a pieces to watch.
Also on Hoopla, also on Canopy.
Oh my god,
the library service that we talked about.
There's so many services.
The Amazon Prime piece is actually Freevee. It's on Freevee for
That's
free.
Really cool. Okay, cool.
Yeah, it's everywhere for free.
It's everywhere.
Like, this is one of those, smaller. You can also get it on Apple TV or the digital things for like $2 or $3. It looks like you want to rent it.
And I'd actually suggest, if you want to watch it with no commercials, lean towards Amazon.
Freevee has ads.
Freevee has ads?
Yeah.
Okay, never mind. I was trying to think of a service that you could watch it over there.
I mean, unless you mean like, unless it's also on Amazon Prime.
Yeah,
Video.
it says that it's on Prime Video, but let me check.
It might be like a add-on service.
Yeah.
It looks like it's free on Canopy, Plex, and the CW app.
Wow. That's a lot of ads. So we listed damn near 10 apps that have it for free. So like, you cannot miss this movie.
Speaking of ads, where did you watch the? Oh my God, the Offence.
The Offence.
Where did you watch it, Ronald?
I believe I rented it. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, so like I
watched it on Tubi. And speaking of ads, I was like, I've never seen so many ads for Amazon starring Noah Schnapp from Stranger Things. Like every ad was the ad of him in his dorm room. Really? Saying what he chose for college.
And that is, I mean, nothing against young Mr. Schnapp. That is an annoying ad campaign. I mean, like,
oh my God,
you've seen the commercial once and you're fine. So seeing it, I know how those online things, I don't actually mind. I mean, I hate commercial interruptions, just like we all do in 2023. Yeah. However, I can watch commercials if it's not the same 2 commercials over and over again.
Right.
But what kills me is the same 2 or 3 over and over again. I get so like hateful of existence when that happens. So yeah, I went the Amazon route, but I did rent it in standard def, which felt very strange. But I think it added to the smudgy drabness of this movie, because I do see that it had a Blu-ray release. So I'm assuming there's an HD cleaned up version that I might have liked better. But it's 1973, and it definitely had, to me, the look and feel of it had there's a tiny bit of nostalgia for that type of sort of production value, even if this felt like it was sort of, like you said, Steve, kind of pointedly style free. So
yeah,
but no, I think this is interesting. Maybe maybe we all can do kind of a scary one for this next wave then, or something like that. I don't know.
Okay.
That sounds
or we can theme it like a survivalist type thing. Ooh. I saw a remake of The River Wild pop up on Netflix that I'm
yeah
in with Adam Brody, so maybe that'll be my pick in a couple weeks.
That's pretty crazy. What?
It's a River Wild remake, on Netflix. Adam Brody.
Wow.
Oh, who else is in it?
I did.
Taron Killam, and
yeah.
I forget who plays the
comedic actor Taron Killam.
Yeah. Maybe Leighton Meester. I don't know, like somebody like that.
I think I don't know if it's her, but that's the name I was trying to come up with too. So,
it's something like that. She was on a show in the early aughts.
Okay, interesting.
I mean, I'm just gonna tease a little bit. Then maybe that'll be my pick. I don't know. Who knows?
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it is Leighton Meester. Boom, got it. That marketing got me, guys.
Got you, man.
But yeah, okay, cool. Eden Lake. When we get to that, who knows? It'll be a couple weeks. We got some vacations coming up here.
Yeah, that's true.
But I mean, you got plenty of time to choose one of the 7 options.
Yeah.
And as a reminder, anytime we do these, I highly recommend, if you like playing along, downloading the Just Watch app. Like, it's a free app. It's iOS, Android. That's what I use every week when we go over these, or even when I'm just looking for something and I don't have access to it like immediately. It's basically you type in what you want to watch and it shows you where you can stream it. You can buy it. Tells you if it's free or ad supported. I mean, it's a really great kind of streamlined way of finding what you want to watch and where you can get it. So, and we've yet to receive sponsorship money from Just Watch, but I mean, this is their last freebie. That's all I'm saying, guys.
Yeah, man.
All right, cool. So, John, you wanted to talk a little bit about the passing of William Friedkin, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just he's one of those names. Actually, not too far from the way people talk about Sidney Lumet.
Sure.
Just see the way I kind of combine the 2 possible pronunciations.
Yeah.
But I mean, he's part of that new Hollywood wave of directors who I don't know, defined that not just what we consider to be kind of like 70s cinema, but a certain kind of boldness and daring cinema that's very like still emulated today by a lot of the indie directors that we love, and a lot of the even some of the kind of popcorn films that we see today are people who were heavily influenced by just this approach. And we were talking about it before we started recording, and we pulled up the filmography of William Friedkin, the movies that he's directed. And, he reminds me, all those guys who had those long careers, where you look at it, there's always something that kind of surprises you that's on the list. And Ronald, you were surprised to see Blue Chips from 1994.
One of my favorite sports movies ever.
So talk about what makes it great. I mean, maybe we're going to find a little bit of a theme in like what.
Yeah. So that movie came out, was it 93 or 94?
Yeah, 94.
So that was the beginning of the Magic era of the NBA. So like Shaq hit the NBA like a ton of bricks. He was bringing backboards down. He was destroying things. And then this accompanying point guard. So point guards typically, for people that don't know, are typically shorter people. Magic Johnson started the trend of there being taller point guards. Penny Hardaway was 6'7", just like Magic Johnson. He was a skinny guy that could throw the ball into your hands no matter where you were. So these two together were magical, but it was the beginning of that. So this movie kind of introduced them as people first. It was weird. It was like, it was like Shaq was playing in basically like a swamp area. It was a little exaggerated the way that they did this. He's from Louisiana. He played in LSU. It was a little weird the way they presented it, but
it was weird how they got a basketball net up in the swamp.
Yes, just like dunking on trees and shit. But it was a little like this introduction of these two people that would become these NBA legends, and it was handled like, I don't know if he likes basketball, but it was handled in a way that really presented it like somebody who knew basketball in the recruitment process. Like it really came across like this guy had seen basketball. So like, you bringing up his name and me seeing what he done, I love that attention to detail that this movie had. And it, it had a level of corny, but like, that's every movie in the 90s, right? So like,
right.
But there's this attention to detail that is like unmatched in that movie. Just like, really cool. Like what you have to be to essentially become a recruiter is like a father figure, but not trying to replace somebody's father, but also really cool, like somebody you want to hang out with. And Nick Nolte really captures that in this movie. This like real father figure that he approaches these two players with. I have a lot of fond memories of that movie, man. So yeah, rest in peace. It's so sad. It's sad when you hear about people like that who are creating. I mean, Exorcist. Come on, Exorcist is in every reel of every movie, every like award show. It's like it's always that clip of her going nuts in the bed. Come on, iconic. What movies from his filmography stand out to you guys?
Yeah, Steve, I'm kind of wondering about you.
I was gonna say I've always been pretty cold on The Exorcist. It's like I'm in the minority here. I've made that comment before in the podcast. Like I
like
respect
that
it, and I do. It's fine, but like it just isn't for me. It's not for me. But when I think of his movies, the two that come to mind for me are The French Connection and To Live and Die in L.A. I think when I found those movies, definitely during a run like in my college years where I was trying to see all these like great movies, that I'd heard about from, whether it was from the 70s or the 80s, like movies I had never come across my radar before. But just trying to kind of round out, my exposure to different filmmakers and actors. And, at the time, both really, I don't know, for whatever reason, being into like finding movies that like Willem Dafoe had been in, or William Peterson, obviously Gene Hackman, Roy Scheider, like things like that actors were pulling me in certain directions. And then I was like, oh, this is obviously a well-respected filmmaker. But those two of the ones I've seen of his, I mean, I've seen pretty much, I think, most of his movies. John, you had mentioned Sorcerer before we started recording. I have not seen that, but I've always wanted to. So maybe that's a thing I have to make happen. But I don't know. I just really like the grittiness of both, The French Connection and To Live and Die in L.A. And I know that word is used a lot, when movies come out today that have any kind of edge or feel kind of raw or unpolished, which I feel like both of those movies do, but they both have a lot of style and substance to them. And I just love that, any kind of like crime thriller, I like that kind of movie in general. But yeah, those two are for sure the ones that stand out to me when I think of the ones that I've seen of his. Obviously, with the exception of having not seen Sorcerer, which I've always heard really good things about. What about you? What stands out to you, John?
I mean, I would say Sorcerer might be the first one I would mention, just because it's such a insanely specific story. It's these guys who are basically they're transporting really I'm not going to say too much about it because I don't want to spoil it, but they're transporting something really dangerous through really dangerous terrain, and the job they're accepting to travel with these like explosives over this, it's like it seemed to be sort of a nearly impossible mission, but not the Ethan Hunt kind, but like it's one of those like suicide mission kind of things of like we're sending the most expendable, the most low down, the most out of options men on this mission, and they're not really expected to succeed necessarily, but if they do succeed, hey, great, but if not, it's who cares what happens to these guys is kind of the feeling of it. And it's got Roy Scheider in it, and he's amazing, and it's like if you like him, then this is like one of the key Roy Scheider movies. But it's also got a full cast of these kind of really interesting sort of macho types, and you kind of see how they either rise to the occasion or fall before it, of this crazy thing that they have to do. And it is itself, I don't want to say it's a remake of the French film Wages of Fear. I think it's sort of a readaptation of the book that the French film Wages of Fear. I think Friedkin always bristled at the notion that he remade someone else's movie so much as that he just, that's an oft argued thing by directors that are readapting a book. But, for whatever that's worth, I think Wages of Fear is fantastic as well. And in some ways, I mean, I don't know. They both have different moments and feels to them that that make them distinct, but they both have the same sort of bleak premise. Not to overuse that word this episode, but the other one I would mention is the one that I've said to you guys before we started recording too. That's almost cautionarily, but his film Cruising, which depicts Al Pacino kind of going undercover in the S&M underground of gay clubs, because there's this murderer murdering gay men in these kind of bondage settings. And it is both a very problematic look, that you would never condone this today. Someone taking this kind of outsider's view of homosexual lifestyles and treating it like this creepy other world within the world. But it also was sort of one of the first movies to really dig into some of these things and depict some of these things. And William Friedkin, in his maybe bullheaded kind of macho way, was trying to depict something he thought was interesting and with compassion. And the movie's not without compassion, but it has a couple of really strange moments in it and a couple of, regrettable sort of plot threads, but it's made like a giallo film or a slasher film almost. So I think it's interesting and incredibly flawed, but Cruising would be the other movie. But like I said, only if you weren't completely scared off by the description I just gave it, because I could see people today people were offended at the time. And if people were already offended, I think, when was that made? Like back in 1980 or something like that. If people were mad about it then, that it was some crazy shit. But Sorcerer would be the easier top pick. And I'm kind of with you on The Exorcist, Steve. It's never been one of my movies, but I totally get what it does that makes it special, and the way that it depicts a sort of grounded world, and like the emotional trauma, the emotional effects of what's happening on a small group of characters. It kind of reminds me of almost like an A24 elevated horror sort of treatment of a story, where it's like we've seen the possession narrative, but this is like, it's a slow paced, it's kind of another one of these 70s movies that might seem a little sluggish by today's standards, but
right.
It's kind of important for how influential it is. And I still think it's got a couple of great like all-timer moments in it that I would say, okay, it's worth seeing for that alone. And if you're a film buff or a horror buff, obviously you probably already know it, but yeah, it's not one of my favorite Friedkins necessarily, and it's never been one of my favorite horror movies really either. So that being said, a guy who stayed vital and in fact has a movie coming out next month at I think the Venice Film Festival. Is that correct? The Caine Mutiny Court Martial, which is the Venice Film Festival in September 2023, and it's it's like the other side of the Caine Mutiny, the kind of court martial scenes, another based on a play. Movie, but it stars Kiefer Sutherland, Jason Clarke, Lance Reddick. Maybe this is his last role. J. Duplass, So yeah, I think it'll be a pretty interesting movie, and it's another testament to one of those guys who went out working.
Wow,
really cool, man. Rest in peace. I'm looking for that. That cast sounds incredible. I wanna check that out.
Well, has anybody seen anything else that merits mentioning before we sail away into the night?
I wanted to mention I finally got around to watching the Beanie Bubble.
Oh, I wanted to watch that, but I like was too sleepy the other night.
On
How
Apple
was it?
TV Plus. I kind of liked it. It's nothing great, to be blunt, but I mean, again, it's like these things of like the 90s, you know, like these timely things of our generation, like where, you know, it's like I can remember, like I can remember my place in that part of history, you know, of that story, you know. So like being able to see, you know, this fictional kind of, well, fictional based on a true, loose, whatever you want to call these things, where like things have been changed, but it's pretty much the story of what happened. And you know, kind of seeing the ins and outs of the company, and kind of how how Ty Warner, like kind of with the help of a lot of very technically savvy and just really impressive women in his life, was able to kind of build this company up to what it was before the bubble burst, and kind of maybe how he did all of these people wrong. So that really kind of paints him in a really horrible picture, which I think has always been the case. And he's never really had a great reputation, and that I even was aware of back then, the little bit I did know of him. But yeah, I watched the documentary a little while ago that was on Max, called Beanie Mania, which is a really, that documentary is really good. Like if you're interested just in this whole craze of that bubble, and you know what it was like, just like socioeconomically, like the impact it had on the internet as we know it today, on eBay as you know it today. You know, the idea of Ty really being one of the first like commerce websites for products. I mean, that stuff is just mind blowing, being reminded of that and watching that. And they go over that, you know,
interesting
in this movie. But you know, there's some really fun performances in it. Like, you know, Zach Galifianakis is pretty good. And I thought that I never remember her name. She was in Blockers.
Yeah, I
God, I feel so bad. I can never remember her, but everything she's in,
Geraldine?
I love her.
Something
Yes, Geraldine. What's her last name?
Uh,
Viswanathan. Yeah, but like everything I see her in, I think she's just great in it.
Yeah,
Like she was in Blockers. She was also in what the sorry. Anyway, she's really good in this. I mean, as you know, and knowing more about the woman that her character is based on in real life, who this is based on, and like what that woman went on to do, both with internet commerce and marketing and things like that. It's just bonkers. Like beyond the beanie fad of what it was in the market, and like that it created, and all the money that was made around the reseller market and all that stuff. It was just, you know, another one of those kind of, we talked about some of the bigger scope ones like recently, like Air and BlackBerry, but like this is another one of those things of like you know, these 90s moments that were, or 80s 90s moments that were pretty monumental for the landscape that we kind of grew up in. But Bad Education was the other one that Geraldine was in that I thought was so good. That was the Hugh Jackman education scandal.
I really like that movie.
Yeah, that was good.
Great. That was really good. But yeah, this one's fun. I mean, it's an easy watch. And again, I wanted to kind of bring up that documentary. If you watch the Beanie Bubble on Apple TV Plus and want more about this Beetle, you know, the Beanie craziness, the on Max, there's a really good documentary called Beanie Mania that is definitely better as a watch than this movie. But I mean, you know, it's kind of fun seeing you know, Galifianakis and Sarah Snook's in this, and what's her name? God, I'm blanking out all these names today.
Elizabeth Banks.
Banks, yeah, exactly. She's all these people are just having a fun in this movie, which is, you know, it's fun to see people having fun in a movie about beanie babies.
Yeah,
right.
But yeah, that's and
that there's a heel. Yeah. I just love that there's even a heel in that story. You know what I mean? And that like someone is actually the villain of the Beanie Baby story. It's like, you know,
Yeah, well, most times you can probably point to the founder, the big wig, the billionaire as the the heel,
right? Who made the
bad
money off of
guy.
the thing some other person thought of, and then
Exactly.
gave to him for $5 or whatever.
Yes, and just like continued to pay the person $12 an hour who was running their website,
Right.
making billions of dollars. Like it's ludicrous, but I mean it's for all accounts what it was. I mean,
it's why there's a strike happening right now.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Or
Exactly.
multiple strikes.
Multiple fronts. Yeah.
I mean, the VFX artists at Marvel, that's worth mentioning. I mean, so much of what we've been talking about with the whole Marvel, what's wrong over there thing, the fact that the VFX artists are being overworked and underpaid, and that seems to be the tip of the spear for like the way that we see these movies as having production problems and having pipeline issues. It's like, and we've even said we're not blaming the poor overworked artists, but the effects in this movie were dog shit. Like, I don't know. I just think that it's like that was a major like domino that fell for me of the whole like, how can you fix Marvel? I was like, I hadn't even thought about like, maybe start paying the VFX artists and giving them time to do really quality work, and some of that shit that we've been complaining about would be ameliorated.
Speaking of the product of that abuse, I actually saw one of those products of that abuse Across the Spiderverse. I actually bought the movie for the $20 PVOD price. Man, I had the experience that was a little different than y'all. I had the terrible mix. So I had never seen the movie in its intended sound with its intended sound. Watching it at home was so fun, man.
Oh, I'm about to. I can't wait to watch it again.
This is one of those movies that just translates well. You have a 4K TV. It's just crisp, just a crisp. It looks good on anything. It looks good on a phone. Looks good on it. Just is one of those movies. This is one of those ones that I'm definitely going to buy a physical copy of because I need to hear the kind of spatial stuff, because it's incredible on I watched it on iTunes. It was really cool. So that's one. The other one I wanted to mention, because I'm actually going to the Chinese theater in a couple weeks, is one that Bruce Lee didn't get a chance to see, and that's Enter the Dragon, the WB100 4K remaster of that. I bought it Tuesday from Best Buy.
That must have been a disappointment to Bruce Lee, because he loved 4K. I mean,
he loved 4K. He was like, look, when can I see this shit as crystal clear as possible? But it's so funny you say that, because this is a special edition that includes some of the scenes that were kind of lost in his passing. The studio kind of pieced together the movie, but there were these kind of integral scenes that he wanted to be in the movie that were written in his version of the script that just never made it. And there was a version that came out, I think the Criterion may include it, and has an introduction from his wife, but this one is in 4K, and it's a gorgeous transfer. I don't know how they did Atmos with a stereo mix, but they managed to do it. They managed to like make these enveloping sort of sound effects, like mostly like crowd stuff, nothing really crazy beyond that. But it feels like you're in the middle of the crowd when he's fighting a couple of the challengers, Bolo, people like that. Jim Kelly is still amazing in it. You come straight out of a comic book is one of my favorite lines ever used for a villain. And it's so crazy. What's the guy's name? In Freddy, who has a huge role in Enter the Dragon. Hold on. He's the cop.
Oh,
John Saxon. John Saxon has a huge role, and he's incredible. So
it's funny that's what he was before. Like, it was shortly after that he started playing the sort of cop and dad roles. And he said that he felt his career change when, like, he didn't like it when it first happened, but then he realized his wheelhouse was playing the sort of like middle-aged guys. But before that, he was like a young badass, right?
He's in Enter the Dragon and Nightmare on Elm Street, like two
and Black Christmas, which is like incredible. So three.
I hear those movies thrown around like crazy. The fact that he's in 3 of those movies, and really is like the heart in a lot of them is really cool. So like, this is a movie that you can't pass up. If you want to rent it, it's now in 4K on all the PVOD stuff, Hulu, Vudu, iTunes, Amazon Prime. So, Enter the Dragon special edition was a fun experience, man.
That's a good rec.
Yeah. So those are two I saw. What about you guys? Besides,
I think that's it for me. I mean, I would just say I loved the way the Righteous Gemstones season
me too.
wrapped up. And I'm glad that wasn't a series finale. However, if it hadn't come back for a fourth season, that would have been a fine ending for the whole shebang.
Definitely.
But I'm glad that they get to continue doing their weird little epic saga. But aside from that, I feel like there's things coming up that I can't wait to talk about. Like I can't wait to check out Changeling on Apple TV Plus and talk about that. Some of these fall movies that didn't get bumped back to next year. I'm still excited to see what happens with all that. But right now, I feel like I'm in a state of needing to catch up on a couple more things, but I didn't really have anything else this week that was, I thought I might get out to see the Meg 2, but there was no urgency there. And I still intend to watch the Insidious Red Door movie, but I realized I never saw the last Insidious movie, so I probably should watch that before I see this one. I gotta go back. We gotta go back.
I need to watch that too. I was gonna watch it the other night and it just didn't happen. I was hoping.
I'm most intrigued because Patrick Wilson directed it. Like that's the thing that makes me most interested to see it for some reason.
Yeah, and I mean, it was a huge. I don't know, like. In perspective, it's the biggest horror movie of the year, like box office wise. Like I just saw them posting figures for that earlier this week. That it was bigger than Scream 6. It was bigger than Evil Dead Rise, which are big. These are big hits,
successful movies, right?
I think it did like 180 or 190 million or something like that, like worldwide, which is, that's big.
Looks like Patrick's gonna direct something else. That's really cool, man.
Yeah,
wow.
And it seems like for most people, at least fans of this franchise or, of like horror fans, like most people that I know that have seen it, and at least liked it.
Yeah.
Especially for getting further into the franchise. It's doesn't seem to be really 183 million worldwide.
Wow. But isn't that the great thing about horror in a way, is that you do get they aren't precious about, I love good franchises or movies that don't have sequels. However, if you're going to do it, it's the horror approach is the fun approach, where it's let's milk it, let's do prequels, let's do sequels, let's do spinoffs. Sure. It's kind of trashy, but I like I don't know. I grew up loving that sort of aesthetic of it could be that part 7 in a series is actually great, and you want to say to people, no, you should see part 7 because it's great. So I think that I can't believe I couldn't think of an example of anything made up or anything real when I was saying that, but no, I think that also with Patrick Wilson, he's one of those actors that he's not quite one of our guys, but he's very close to being one of those actors. I think we just sort of appreciate his vibe that he brings, and it took a while for me to realize that I was into it. Like the first few times I saw him, I thought he was maybe a little milquetoast and a little bland, and then once I saw what he was doing with that, particularly with Fargo season 2, is when I really homed in on his thing. So I'm glad he's having that kind of success. That must be a pleasant surprise, because I hear that they kind of lured him back almost with well, if I'm going to come back and do this, I want something different. I want to take on a bigger challenge, and I think the directing was the thing that brought him into it. So
and yeah, so looking at this I know we didn't see this film to review it, but we're just talking context here. $16 million budget, made 183 million worldwide. This is why this is a winning franchise. It's a win for him, for the studio. And also something I learned during all the promotion for this movie, both by him and who I realize now is his wife, Dagmara Dominsik. She was Carolina on Succession. I never knew that was his wife. They've been married for 2 decades or something.
Really?
But she was
she's great.
posting. I follow her on Twitter, back from Succession, and she was just nonstop gushing about him making this movie and how much love he put into it, and he sang a song with Ghost as in the movie, a metal band, and it's he's all about this movie, and it was really kind of sweet to see how much she was championing that. So I'm really happy that it was successful, because I like
he must like franchise. A musical moment. He must like a musical moment because he does that great Elvis song in The Conjuring 2, which is one of my favorite scenes of any movie for some reason. I'm Not ashamed
It's
to
definitely
say.
memorable. Yeah. But yeah, no, I wanted, to circle back. I'm really excited to finally watch it now that that's on demand as well. So yeah, maybe that's something we'll catch up on the next episode that we together. So yes, on that, I don't know when we'll get back together again. I mean, we may try to squeeze in an episode. We've got some vacations coming up. You guys are going on vacay, week back to back weeks. I'll be going sometime in September, but like, we'll get something together, whether it's something that we have to release during that time down. And if not, we'll just be back in a couple weeks to talk about everything else.
Yeah.
If something pops up on the feed, make sure you follow us at movieshmovie.com. You can subscribe to any podcast feed there. But if you see something pop up in your feed and it's like, hey, that came out next week, that was a surprise for you. And we'll try to make it happen, but don't be upset if it's not there, because we will be back. Just give us some time. People are going to travel. People got to enjoy. Ronald said he's going to the Man Chinese Theater for Enter the Dragon. He's going to see some other stuff out there, I hear. He's going to some theme parks. He's going to enjoy himself. John's got some enjoyment coming his way next week. This is the time to enjoy. And
I might make a lightsaber. That's all I'm thinking.
You know what? Don't get ahead of yourself, okay?
Right.
Choose my stone.
Happens, let it happen, and then just send us photos. That's all.
Crystal, I believe. I don't think it's their.
Yeah, they don't say stone.
Choose your crystal first. Yeah,
Kyber crystals.
Kyber crystal. That's right.
Yeah, so we'll be back soon, guys. I promise. YouTube.com/Movie Podcast. If you want to subscribe to the video portion, make sure you hit the subscribe button and the bell so you get notifications when those videos come up. And we'll see you soon. That's all we'll say for now. And as always, you've made our day. Thanks.
Bye.